Hi, guys, and welcome to the Neurodivergent podcast, where we stop pretending, drop the mask, and say what actually needs to be said about life with a neurospicy brain. I'm James, the fitness and mind coach, and I'm talking to someone who's had more than their fair share of barriers and smashed through them all. My guest today is a diagnosed neurodivergent mental health advocate and living proof that labels do not define your limitations. From being non-verbal until he was 6, he is now using his voice to change other people's lives. Quick heads up though, this podcast is unfiltered, unsanitized with the occasional swearing. You have been warned. Let's do this. Hi, Connell, and thank you so much for joining us for the Neurodivergent podcast. We like to just get in this straight away. So why don't you just tell the guys listening a bit about yourself, who you are, and if you're happy to share what you do for a job or whatever, just introduce to the guys who you are and we'll go from there.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So hello to the listeners on this podcast. My name is Connell and I'm neurodivergent myself. And I'm also a massive advocate for mental health, going to the gym. I'm into sports, football, and I'm also a inclusive gym instructor as well. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm looking forward to doing this podcast today.
No, I love it. So whereabouts are you based as an inclusive gym instructor?
So I'm pretty much based all over at the moment. So I'm doing a bit of a hybrid role where I'm in Essex and Suffolk, and I also do the odd school session as well. But one of my long-term sort of ambitions is to go into the sensory integration combined with exercise, because I find that I do find that there is a lack of resources out there, especially for children and even young adults with SEN. I'd say that target demographic of, let's say, 16 to 25, those that leave education, there's not really much for them out there. And I think it's the same for kids as well. Like, you think of PE, for example, at school, some of those people, they'll get picked last on the team. So if it's like football or cricket or rounders or whatever, a lot of the time there'll be team captains and everyone picks their mates. And then sometimes those guys get left out, and they are the sorts of people that I want to like focus on, train and stuff like that. And that's something that I'm hugely passionate about. And there's something that needs to be more awareness of. And that's why I'm a massive advocate for promoting inclusion, not just within exercise, but just in the world in general. There needs to be so much more of that.
Mate, 100%. Like that was the reason how I got all started in the first place, especially around the mental health side of things. I didn't really discover, like, for those who know that I'm a suicide survivor, and exercise was a means of keeping myself grounded, until I actually learned to discover that it was more so neurodivergence than mental health. It was just, when I was growing up, neurodivergence didn't really exist. You had the severity of autism, and that was about as much as people dabbled in. They didn't really understand the full spectrum of it. But no, I resonate with the being picked last and whatnot, or even like that struggle to get into sport. So did you say that you actually work inside Essex? Because that's where I'm from. I'm from Essex.
Yeah. So I'm currently working within Essex. We have 3 inclusive gyms all around. Like, we have one in near East Burgoll. We have one in Sudbury, which is sort of, I'd say, Suffolk, sort of borderline. And then we've got one that we've just opened up in Langham. And I'm also obviously wanting to go into schools, do inclusive PE as well. I also want to link back to your what you just touched upon there just now with, being a suicide survivor. And also, I'm going to sort of revert the question back to you. So you said that back then it wasn't really understood when you were a child. What was that like? What was that like for you? So,
Yeah, no. So, see, for me personally, I feel like I come from a completely different world to what most people do. It's like my family was so sort of accepting about, and we used the word before we started recording, like quirks. I love that word, and it always reminds me of My Hero Academia as well. Like, everyone has these quirks, these superpowers, for lack of a better word. But and that's what it was. Like, for me, like, and we'll discuss about you being nonverbal, definitely. But for me, I was actually nonverbal till I was 5. I was elected nonverbal, and
oh wow,
that didn't really come up as an issue for my family. It was like, oh, it's just James being James. I was allowed to do that. The only thing that probably not held me back, because I love where I am now, is my academics was not understood. So when I, obviously, as we know and the listeners know, as neurodivergence, when we find that special someone or that special interest, we chat for ages.
Yeah.
Outside of that, we're silent. So
Yeah.
I would always chat to my mates because they would keep me comfortable in that school situation. But then I was labelled a chatterbox. So then I was backclassed and I was held back. And back then, I don't know if you can do it now, but back then you can prevent people academically from improving for the greater good in a
Yeah.
messed up way.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to me with a lot of my classes. The only one it didn't was my tech class, because naturally we're very creative people as well. I remember developing an automatic hamster feeder when I was in senior school. Yeah, so the hamster feeder that would run on a timer and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, I always say this: I was blessed.
Yeah.
All my family, like, although it was never 100% great, but all my family and all my upbringing and all my careers have always catered and always been there for me and the way I am. And my career's always led that. And like you said, that inclusive gym environment, I was creating an inclusive gym environment. I was an operations manager for a leisure centre that was able to create inclusive gym environments to the point that it was a culture shock for me when I left. When I got made redundant, it was such a culture shock for me that people weren't like the world I'd created inside this leisure centre. And to the point that people that I used to work with or work for me still come back and like say good things about me and my work ethic and what it was like back then.
Yeah.
So it is a strange one. So I always appreciate that it is very rare. My perspective was very rare, but it also gave me the privilege to be able to learn, experiment with myself and do what I'm doing in that controlled environment. So yes, and that's fine. I haven't the one being interviewed. What's up with this?
No, special interest for me and you, we spoke about that. So my special interest, yes, it's exercise, but I'm also a massive football fan, and I could list off all the football facts and I could lead off about that. When I was 10, 11, I was so mad into it. I still am, to be fair. I still know quite a lot about it. I used to coach football. I played it. I lived it and pretty much breathed it. And it was something that I was so passionate about that when I was 16, 17, I wanted to then pass on that knowledge onto younger people like me that perhaps were excluded by mainstream like football clubs, because although the understanding is getting a lot better and environments are becoming a lot more inclusive, I do think there is that barrier there that does prevent those who are neurodivergent from accessing those opportunities due to the fact that, yes, you can make empty promises, but are those promises going to be kept? And I found that for me, when I was playing football, I played for like disability specialist football clubs, and that was all well and good. I remember I played for Chelsea Pan Disability Team, which was a massive deal at the time. But the only thing was it was very far to go, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, every week, and did that for 3 months. But it was such a good experience as well, and it was something I enjoyed because I'm a massive Chelsea fan. A little bit of fact there for you. And the fact that I was literally playing for a team that I supported at the time was just brilliant. If I lived near, I probably would still be playing for their Pandis team now. But I think it does goes to show that sport and exercise in general, yes, is becoming better. But like I said to you earlier in the episode, we can still do so much more to promote the inclusion element of it and to ensure that everyone has equal opportunities to access sport and exercise.
100%, mate. And I think like I wasn't into sports growing up, and I wasn't really into sort of physical activity until I learned that was really good for me. So it was my family are massive sports fans, and my in-laws are massive sports fans as well. They're huge rugby fans, and my stepdad's a huge West Ham fan, and all the sort of my brother-in-laws, etc., are all sports fans. So I get lost in conversation a lot of the time because I was always a big gamer growing up. But I think that was partly because, and it still happens now, is when I was training or when I was getting into it, no one really understood how to communicate special skills. And I've learned that now growing up because I play American football. I'm aware of myself. I can train, I can adapt, and I can do things because I'm aware of neurodivergence. But again, like you're saying, people that are not necessarily aware they're neurodivergent or not necessarily aware that the problem is in with the communication and not with themselves, they often get put off sport, or they often get put off pushing themselves further into it. And that's what I found, that having to understand and been put in a situation where I've inadvertently realized physical activity is good for me by being in the forces and having to do that
Yeah.
exertion of physical activity, and then learning from that not many people get put in that situation where it's like, you have to do this physical activity. There's no choice. So they
Yeah.
often avoid it. So what you're trying to do is really good, and it's something that needs to be done, and it's similar to a passion of mine. But that's really good that you're already on that journey and you're trying to tap into that. And especially around schools, my son is neurospicy, and trying to get him to commit to a sport long term is quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think it can be difficult because one bad experience can shape one person's perception of that said thing. They might not want to try that experience again due to that perceived bad experience they had at that said sport. But in reality, I think a good coach makes all the difference as to whether that person succeeds. If those small little adjustments can be made, and that's not just within sport, that can be within the workplace as well. If those small adjustments are made, reasonable adjustments, that can make such a massive difference whether that person succeeds, especially if you're neurospicy. If you're neurodivergent and you need those reasonable adjustments and accommodations, you're gonna succeed. It's pretty simple. And I do want to touch on the sort of employment statistics, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well. There is a lack of neurodivergent people in employment, especially autistic people, those with learning difficulties, and they don't tend to get accepted as such by lots of other employers out there. Yes, there are some employers that have the disability confident badge. Brilliant. Massive tick box exercise. And I was like, yeah, brilliant. Just stick it on the application form to say that they're accepting, they're understanding. But when you actually go, say if that person goes in for like a job interview, and they go into the job and they get given all the empty promises in the world, go into it, and then actually they're not doing what they are promising. And I do find that's something that really needs to change as well. So again, I'm touching on inclusion within employment, as well as obviously inclusion within sport and exercise. I think inclusion is such a big thing, and we need to. I'm going to continue speaking about it till the cows come home, but it's something that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, no, and I have to agree with you. Like, so my day job, as I like to call it, I actually work within the NHS and the Essex County Council, and that's something that we regularly talk about now, which you would have thought they would have talked about sooner. But I'm part of the neurodiversity staff forum where we support people, and even then, when I'm talking to directors who are actively trying to change, they're amazed about the awareness of some of their stuff. And you're like, hey, no, you should be telling us. It should be top down, not bottom up, really. And but it is sort of changing within the NHS. I can confirm they are doing a lot of stuff around flexible working, but you're not the first person to tell me this, and you're not the first person to say that it's not that great elsewhere. And again, it's that I think people are afraid of neurodivergence, especially neurodivergents that are open about it, who are out, because we can sometimes come across as awkward. And especially
Yep.
autistic people, we have a way about us. We have a very clear, calculated, methodical way. And I remember 2-3 years ago when I started my job, and I've always been open about my quirkiness. And I just went, I don't do grey. Do not give me ambiguous information that I can't interpret, because nothing's going to get done. Give me black and white, end of, there is no grey. And they're like, oh, okay, thanks for the information. And to be fair, they didn't. But for the first month or so, it was all like, oh, maybe you should do this, or could you do this? And I'm like, tell me what you want. Tell me what you want and I'll smash it out of the park. But don't tell me, make me guess what you want and nothing's getting done. And I think that they're
exactly
afraid.
the same thing. I found exactly the same thing, as I'm very much someone, I prefer to be shown how to do things. Like, if you're going to give it to me on a piece of paper, just write a load of waffle down, I'm not really going to interpret that information well. My brain is not going to interpret it well because of the fact that it's written in a different way. Everyone has different ways of learning, and it's not just I say, well, what is normal. But Neurodivergents have different ways of learning. That's what makes our quirks so brilliant. We're not all one and the same. We all learn in different ways. Like I learn from being shown how to do things, and then as the more I continue to do it, the better I get at it. But we are also guilty of being perfectionists, and I'm someone, especially when I was younger, I used to beat myself up when I didn't get something right the first time, and I would beat myself up, and it was not good for my mental health in that sense, because if I wasn't a perfectionist something and I didn't get it right first time, I would beat myself down, even though I'd have my family encouraging me that it's okay, and some of my teachers at school and stuff, I'm like, it's okay, you don't need to get it right first time, it's practice. I would still beat myself up no matter what. And that's something that over the last sort of couple of years that I've been actively trying to work on, that it's okay not to get it right first time. It's okay to fail. Failure is how you learn. It's as simple as that. The more you keep trying something, the better you're going to be at that said thing. Even then, if it's something that's overwhelming you, you can always simply revisit it at a later date when your brain and your head's in a much clearer mind space.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, mate. To be fair, like this is something that I have always struggled with. Like even now, like if anyone watches my Instagram, they must think I'm a lunatic because every couple of months I'll release some new or improved product that I'm doing a coaching offer, and I'm just a couple of months ago I released a new coaching offer, and now I've just released an even more improved offer because I don't feel good selling a service or promoting a service that I feel is subpar, but when I build it, it's not subpar, and it's not subpar, but you get to that stage where you start pulling at the threads, don't you? And things start, and you like, don't like it. And then rejection sensitivity from yourself kicks in. And it's always been a struggle with mine. And again, with the failure thing, I think that is so underrated that people need to understand that failure is a part of learning. And it goes back to, and you can relate to this as a coach, when people join the gym, if they feel that they can't do something right or they can't do something that the other person's doing across the gym, then they're automatically doing it wrong when they forget that that person's probably been in there for like the last 10 years and they've perfected their technique. But people beat themselves up. And then if you can go one step further and say it could also be down to the coach not communicating it clear enough to a neurodivergent. And those sorts of things, I think people really don't understand. And whether you're neurodivergent or not, or you don't know, that can make a massive difference because then you're just trapped in this spiral of self sort of like criticism and rejection sensitivity and shame. And it takes people like yourself to educate people and try and snap them out of that by going, look, you can be crap at something. It's fine.
Yeah.
And to be fair, my wife will probably kill me for saying this, but she has undiagnosed ADHD without a doubt. But she'll expect to be 100% perfect at something the first time she tries it. And the amount of rows we had, and I go, look, you wouldn't go to Japan and expect to speak Japanese from day one for just hearing the language once. You've got to learn it. So why are you expecting to be great at your job at day one? It's their responsibility to train you. Why are you expecting to be a great parent at day one? It's our job to learn
Agreed.
on the go, etc.
Agreed. I do think that self-criticism, you've hit the nail on the head. You can't expect to be perfect at something at the first attempt, and it goes back to the whole people in the gym, beginners, and I know this from experience that a lot of them will tend to beat themselves up because they all compare themselves to other people that have been doing it for much longer than them, and they're like, oh, well, I can't do this and they can, they're much better than me. I'm like, well, no, you're on your own journey, you're writing your own chapter, not to get philosophical, but you are you're writing your own page, you're writing your own pages, and that's something they need to realize, because if they continue to compare themselves to other people all the time, and they're going to go down a dangerous rabbit hole of, like you say, self-criticism, shame, and not having that self-belief in themselves. And it takes just one person to snap that out of them over time, building up that self-confidence, building up the self-belief, and then being like, actually, no, you can do it. You can do it. You just got to keep trying, keep believing, and in time, it's going to naturally fall into place the more you practice it. It's like with an exercise or anything in life. the more you practice that exercise, the better you're going to execute it because you are used to that said exercise. I mean, for example, I've worked with clients who've had varying medical conditions, stuff like that. I've worked with people with MS. I've worked with people with cerebral palsy, brain injuries. I've even got a client with dystonia. Dystonia is involuntary muscle spasms, and that's something that can't be helped. She carries on and she does well. She's a strong person. That's just a prime example of how much perseverance that can take. I always find as well that that those people that have been through all those sorts of troubles, not just physical disabilities, but just people in general. When they've had those struggles in life, but still continue to rise up. That's something for me that is truly inspirational. And they go out, they turn up, even on the days where they don't even feel like it. Like at times, motivation is, yes, you can have bursts of motivation, and that's the thing with people in the gym. They're gonna have bursts of motivation, and then when they hit a day where it's like, oh, I don't feel like doing it, they then hit the self-destruct button, and that's when it starts to get messy. And then it's about redirecting them in a nice way and being like, okay, we've had a little waddle. Let's rein that back in. Let's get back on track. Let's not completely self-destruct. There's still ways that we can get you back on track, back on that saddle, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and I think what you said as well about people with MS, and so I actually owned a gym. The gym's still operating. I owned it with a friend of mine, and we specialised in stroke rehabilitation,
Yeah,
neurological injury rehabilitation,
yeah, that's
as
pretty
well
much what
as
my work do.
as well as mental health. So my side was the mental health and the neurodivergent, and Neil's side was the neurological injury and stroke. And you're right, those people that come in with those injuries, uh, like batter it out day in, day out, and they'll see. And then, but I think if you flip the script, I think
Yeah,
like neurodivergence and mental health and stuff like that, it's always there, like that null pain in the background, to the point that just like a physical null pain, you kind of just like shoo it off, and then eventually one day it's just going to go beyond the point that you can crawl it back without some serious intervention. And we compare ourselves to that physical extremity of an example, and you go, well, they can do, why can't I? I'm like, yeah, but you're battling this invisible sort of ailment that you
mm,
can't grasp, you can't understand. Everything is different, even when you put two people the same together. You can't pinpoint it, and without trudging through that mud, you're not gonna know. And that's the hardest part, that very first part of self-discovery, whatever it is. It's obvious when someone has a stroke. It's obvious when someone's got MS, and it's shit. Like you don't like to have a stroke or MS or anything like that, but it's obvious.
yeah,
It's like it's without sounding like a dick. It's like a vet trying to work on an animal. You don't know. They
mm,
can't communicate that. They have to discover through trial and error. And I find that, and a lot of my training is all about stripping it back to basic and helping people rebuild that from that. But even in self-discovery, I'd be like, he come in a wheelchair a couple of weeks ago, and now he's walking by himself, and I can't even go in the gym without my headphones. If I'm that's how I used to talk to myself. I'm like, I can't even go to the gym without headphones. And he manages to walk in 3 weeks. Like, what sort of person am I? And I had to battle that. So I understand exactly where people come from. And like I said, I've been to dark places and I've recovered from it. I'm very fortunate. But it's like you say, that you're just trying to tap into that mentality of a physical disability or a physical injury
yeah,
and translate it somehow to neurodivergence and mental health. And it's
hundred
such,
percent.
it can be done. And I'm sure that you do all the time, but it's not mainstream. It's very,
Yeah,
very personal in it, and it
yeah,
needs to be. Each person needs to go on their, like you said, their own journey of discovery, their own learning. You need to discover how they learn, and that's why some of the really good coaches out there are ex-teachers as well, because they learn about these communication skills and these different learning skills. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah,
100%. I think that you flipping the script there hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree more. The fact is that when you're someone that's neurodivergent, like everyone has different communication styles, and I found that from training fellow neurodivergents like myself. I've had to be like, okay, right, I'm communicating this in a certain way, but they respond differently, so I have to then adapt how I communicate or show or demonstrate an exercise. And most of the time, if with all clients, I pretty much will demonstrate the exercise, like, especially if they're quite new to it or if they just need that, sort of visual aspect, then I will show them how to do the exercise, show them how to do it in a safe manner, and I'll also communicate it so that I'm breaking it down into small steps. Because I remember from when I started going to the gym, I was very in and out of consistency. It was very much but surges of motivation. But the fact of the matter is that I didn't have that discipline and structure to continue that. So yes, I'd have this amazing burst of motivation for like 3 or 4 months, and then I just one day would hit, and I'd just be like, yeah, I'd hit the self-destruct button, and that would be that. It was only when I'd actually got with a personal trainer myself that actually I had then had that someone holding me accountable, someone uh, formulating the sort of exercise plan that worked for me and what I wanted to do and the goals that I wanted to work on. For example, when I first went into a gym, I was looking at all these big guys squatting and deadlifting and bench pressing heavy amounts. And guiltily enough, I would self compare. I would compare myself to them and feeling crap about myself because I wasn't getting those numbers that those big guys were hitting. But I know from experience, from interacting, that some of the big guys in the gym, yeah, they may look scary, but they're probably some of the nicest people you could meet, to be truthful. And that's from personal experience. The gym for me has become such a haven and something that I've become so passionate about that I then 2 years ago wanted to, yes, I wanted to go into it, but in a different sort of way, going away from the sort of traditional mainstream gym areas. Because, like, yes, it's brilliant to get your PC qualification, you can do that, you start training people, but then it's a case of, okay, yeah, you train the average Joe, but what about if someone, like you say, is neurodivergent? They have different needs of communication, or they need a different way of directing, or if it's same for like a physical disability, like cerebral palsy, for example, you're not gonna make them do, really heavy deadlifting, squatting, and bench pressing. Although I did see one, I think I saw one guy on, I think, Instagram Reels, and he had cerebral palsy, and he was deadlifting like a really heavy amount. I was like, Joe, fair play. And that's just so inspirational when I see stuff like that as well. People overcoming adversity. That's something that I love seeing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that watching those sorts of videos and seeing it in person that make you sort of double take, but in a good way. You always like can respect that, and that comes from like all walks of life as well. And to be fair, it's probably a nice sort of segue into let's discover a bit more about you, mate. To like about you've spoke about your obviously passion in your gym, but you mentioned to me in the form that you were nonverbal to 6 and you was diagnosed. So was this something that sort of materialized early, or was it just like myself? No one really cared that I was nonverbal, and it wasn't until I was in my late 30s, well, this year I got diagnosed. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
been an unknown journey for me. I was just
Yeah.
allowed to be me. So
Yeah.
how was your journey like growing up? What were the
Of
sort of
course.
barriers and the struggles?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my story as it goes, so I'm 24 now, so I was diagnosed from the age of 2, and pretty much back then, my parents were just given a book where it was like, okay, here you go, just go and deal with it. Basically, like there's no guidebook to this. I know there's no guidebooks to like parenting
Yeah.
and stuff like that, but it's
Dummy's Guide to
such a different
Autistic
ball
Children.
game. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, they're just like, yeah, here's the letter, that's it, off you go. And yeah, and then I wasn't progressing the way a normal child would. Like, yes, I was eating normally, and I was toilet trained and stuff like that by the age of 3 or 4, I believe. But I just wasn't talking, and because I couldn't express myself verbally, I would get frustrated, I would hit out. And I remember a story that I'm going to tell now. I think there was one time I was 5 years old. I'd started school, and my mum told me this story, and I quite like telling this story because it's quite poignant in my journey. I remember I was having a big, like, just massive meltdown, and I wouldn't go into school. And I remember My first ever teacher, actually. My first ever teacher, she obviously tried calmly getting me out of the car, and I kicked her in the back of the head, which was, I can laugh about it now. I can laugh about it now. It's a very funny story to tell, but at the time, I was frustrated and angry because I couldn't express my needs and wants verbally. And then it was only, I don't know if I can remember it properly, it's only when I was 6 I was actually starting to say words and communicate a lot more effectively, which was then a lot easier for my family to be able to work for me that little bit better, because I could then communicate I could communicate and express myself freely. That was something that I I needed in that sense. But the first 6 years of my life, I was nonverbal, and the doctors and I don't know, psychologists and people like that, they were saying I would never be able to talk. Well, here I am proving them wrong. Here I am proving them wrong, and they just pretty much wrote me off. And a lot of neurodivergents get written off, and then they go and do these amazing things. I mean, look at Tom Stoltman. Like
Yeah.
the man's world strongman champion, and he's going on to do amazing things. So it goes to show that in the face of adversity, you can like do so much. And that was when I'd been to Ascend School, and I went there all my life. I was there from I think the ages of 4 turning 5, right up until I was 16.
So how did that sort of transition from schooling, so went to send school, into sort of borderline adult life and making that transition? Was that something that had a had to have a build up to it, or did you sort of like grow into it? I'm not saying like autism
No, no.
slows down or whatever, but sometimes we can adapt. And was you fortunate enough to be able to adapt, because you seem quite independent currently, and you seem to be able to get on and grow like your career and whatnot. So
Yeah,
when was that
absolutely.
transition?
Absolutely. So, um, with with the school I was at, it was very much like you were protected. You're in that sort of send bubble. Therefore, you had your teachers and stuff like that, which was absolutely great and wonderful. And yes, they did teach elements of going out into the real world and working and stuff. But I think until I actually had left school, and it was the best thing to ever happen to me, to be honest, because yes, I was at a SEND school, but I had a very up and down experience. Primary school section, absolutely brilliant. The primary section was brilliant. Secondary was very up and down, purely because there was things that went on that, yeah, I'll speak about in this podcast as well. I'd like mental health wise, where I wasn't really supported necessarily until year 10. And I remember I had this wonderful lady, Miss Rowland, and weirdly enough, I used art therapy as a way to express like what I was feeling and stuff like that. And it was so like freeing to be able to do that, to have someone to speak to, because I was very much looking for an outlet. Yes, I was playing football every lunchtime on the football court, and that's all well and good. But I was very much a young lad, raging hormones, and going through. I think neurodivergents go through puberty probably more intensely than perhaps a neurotypical would, because we're already feeling all these emotions. Our head is like constant squiggle lines going on. And I had this sort of internalized trauma where, because I was bullied at school, at Zen school for 18 months, like horrifically by an individual, to the point, and if it's all right to mention this on this podcast, that I was
Yeah.
suicidal. I was suicidal at the age of 11 due to the horrific torment that I was given by this individual. And the funny thing is, he's actually now in prison for being a paedophile. So it's a bit of karma, really. But obviously, I'm sad for the victims that he traumatized. But it goes to show that I'm quite proud of how far I've come since then. And I had therapy, I had counseling, which massively helped with being able to overcome the feelings and stuff that I was experiencing. And even throughout adulthood, I still had the ripple effects of the scars of the bullying that I was experiencing. I blocked it out so much throughout my teenage years. It was like, actually, I've then become an adult, and it was like, oh, this is becoming a bit. It's now all the feelings come flooding back, and I was like, yeah, I need to get counselling to actually sort of address that once and for all.
Yeah, mate, and that's such so good that you've managed to sort of overcome that transitional, because especially working in the system like I do, we understand that that transition period between being a child to being an adult, um, there's a massive gap compared to it only being like maybe a year. There's no sort of flow through from you being basically coddled, for lack of a better word,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
protected in your bubble, like you put, to then being released out into the
yeah,
wild and going, okay, to fend for yourself. Or you've got to fend for yourself to the point of another organization picks you up. There is no handoff period where you
uh,
go. And luckily for me, my handoff period was in the forces. So I
yeah,
still had that hand holding. I was still going to school. I left school, went straight into the forces, and it was like, right, I'm going to tell you what to do, when to eat, when to crap, when to breathe, when to
uh,
speak. And if you don't do any of this, then, and that suited me. But
yeah,
the reason I left was because I didn't understand neurodivergence and rejection sensitivity kicked in and PDA kicked in, and I left. And like you've probably experienced, neurodivergents don't do things by half. And when we quit, we rage quit.
yep,
And that's
yep,
basically what happened. I phoned my mum. I went, no, fuck you. Your forces. I'm out of here.
uh,
Phone my old man up. They offered me promotion. They offered me everything to keep me because, like a good neurodivergent, I was very academically sound, but they didn't tell
yeah,
me that until after I'd left. But yeah, we tend to panic and go into overdrive and shut down. So it's amazing that you've managed to achieve that and sort of make that transition. Like you said, it wasn't a smooth transition, but you trudged through it and you got there. And so what I'm really interested in now is you've made this transition and you've told me about your Chelsea football. What other sort of milestones as a neurodivergent and as someone who's been through the system are you sort of like proud of that you've achieved? That probably the milestones that people really take lightly, neurotypicals take lightly as well. Like what are those
yeah.
milestones?
So some of those milestones for me, and obviously I remember I did sports coaching at college, and that was like a mainstream course. So after I left school, I then sort of transitioned onto, I'd say, semi. So you're still like mixing with like other people and stuff like that, but I was very much on a course which focused on employability skills and stuff like that. And I was hugely proud of the how I developed like socially, emotionally over those 2 years. I was very much a lot more mature once I'd left the institute, culture institute, which was in the height of COVID, and when all that happened, and that was such a, as we all know, such a life changing experience. And some of my other things I'm quite proud of as well. Yes, I'd won a Petchey Award. I'd won a Culture to Youth Award for exceptional circumstances. I won that in college, and I'm a multi schools council ambassador that continues to fight for inclusion and acceptance within Essex, and pretty much the ambition countrywide. And although I used to do a lot for them back then, and I don't do as much now, I'm still hugely proud to be ambassador of an organisation that aims to break down perceptions in neurodivergence, mental health, and amongst other things. And another one that's quite poignant for me as well, achievements wise, was passing my driving test. Neurodivergent, especially autistic people like myself and you, we find that thing sort of hard to, because you're in those exam conditions. So many things are going on at once. It's a bit like our brains when we're really overwhelmed. You have so many things going on at once. There's all these squiggly lines going on. That's exactly what it's like driving on the road. And although it took me 5 attempts to do my theory, it took me four times and change of instructor to pass my driving test. But the fact is, I'm still hugely, immensely proud of some of those things that I've done over those few years, and I'd even managed to be filmed. I think it was Amazing Apprenticeships, actually. And I was with the BBC, and I remember going there in London and actually seeing my face on there and there was a whole host of other people. It was mad, to say the least, to go to the BBC in London and to actually go and do that and to see, some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes and whatnot. And I'm quite good in front of a camera. I'm quite good at talking. And one of some of my other achievements, I'd I'd even won Ambassador of the Year 4 years ago for the multi schools, which again I was hugely and immensely proud of.
That's awesome. And yeah, it took me 5 attempts on my test to get that right. And it was the attempt that I was just giving up. I was just like, do you know what? I don't care
Yeah,
anymore. And I think that's with neurodivergence as well. We throw our passion so much into something, or if something, we tend to inflate an importance on something, and then that is the core of our world for however
yeah,
much time it needs to be taken. And it can be quite damaging because, like you say, don't you fail it once, that all right, that could be expected. Second, third, fourth, by the fourth time, you're like, do you know what? I don't care anymore. Like,
yeah,
I'm just doing it because everyone else is doing it. And thankfully, that is when the real you as such comes out. When you drop it, when you drop the mask, when you drop all of the concerns of what everyone else thinks, that we're often put up. And for me, I was late diagnosis, so I didn't even realize I was doing it. It turns
yeah,
out that I was. I would say I ended up being very good at it as well. Yeah, and it's when you drop it, and I think the sooner you can realize that, the more beneficial you are as a neurodivergent. Yeah, it definitely um, something that I can relate to. And often in my like fighting days, martial arts days, I had a judo instructor. Love him. He was like a second father to me. And he basically had to grade me during lesson because he knew how much I would refuse to go to these gradings. And he just turned up, graded me one day, gave me my yellow belt, and I was sick and tired of watching you turn up in that white belt, because he knew that I couldn't handle the pressure of an exam. But he knew I was more than
yeah.
good enough to do it. So he was allowed to, and he graded me behind my back. And at the end of the
Mm.
class, he presented me with a yellow belt. And I was like, yeah, great. And I never graded since. That's why I've
Oh,
never
awesome.
graded in any martial art. I never graded in any martial art I've done. And I've done 5 or 6, and I've tried to participate in cage fighting at that sort of level. And my PT was because I wanted to be a MMA coach, and there wasn't any insurance for MMA coaches outside of being a level 3 PT. So that's why I got into it. So it wasn't for lack of skill. I just didn't like tests. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's one of those pressures that we put on ourselves that we inflate the air importance, and we kind of forget.
Yeah, I used to be someone that, like I said earlier in the episode, put massive pressure on myself to achieve something, whether it was an exam. And exams was something that I was never really good at. I was never really the most academic, but I excelled at practical subjects such as PE and drama and stuff like that. I was very good at stuff that didn't necessarily involve being stuck in a classroom with the same 4 walls and sitting on a desk doing worksheets for an hour or two in a lesson, because sometimes I just found that quite tedious and boring, to be honest. Whereas I excelled at the practical elements of it. I love being out there and actually doing something. Like I couldn't just sit, you know, I can just sit for hours and hours on end just doing worksheets and stuff. Like as a kid, I found that just incredibly boring, and sometimes I would just look for ways to try and pass the time. Like, yeah, I'd still do them, but I would just be just so bored of doing them. And yeah, and I liked English. That was a good subject as well. I liked that, and that was probably third subject that I liked. But all I was into was football, and that was all I cared about.
Yeah, no, for me, academically, it was sort of design and technology, IT, things like that, and graphics. Those are the sort of real things that I've sunk my teeth into. But on this episode, we like to obviously declare we are all unapologetically neurodivergent. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it so openly. So, what is like the most unhinged? Like you were diagnosed early, so you was aware of what's going on. But when was that? Was there ever a moment? And I ask all my guests this, where you was like, oh, what I just did, that was seriously like autistic, or that was serious, that was a real neurodivergent moment,
Yeah.
that like either people just staring at me, or no one's got it, or whatever. Is there any sort of moment that it could be humorous or it could be disastrous, whatever crops to mind?
I think definitely someone noticed the fact that I don't really look at them directly in the eyes when I'm talking to someone. That was something where I was like, oh, I am so neurodivergent. It's actually unreal. Like someone could just take one look at me and be like, yeah. And obviously, autism does not have a look, by the way, just to clarify that. It does not have a look. You can't look autistic. Although some people may say otherwise, but you can't look it. But there was a time where, yeah, a few people would have picked up on that. The fact that I don't really look at someone directly in the eyes when I'm talking to them. And they actually asked that. I was like, do I be honest here? And I'm like, yeah, do you know what? I'm at that point now where if someone asks, I'm like, yeah, I am, because I've just normalized it in my head. That's what I've done. So yeah, I
Yeah.
that was my unapologetically neurodivergent moment.
Funny that I actually got called rude once because I do that as well. If I need to listen, especially if I need to listen intently, I will look off to the side. And I remember being an operation manager for a leisure centre with my colleague and really close friend who I opened the gym with. I was listening to what our boss was saying, and he was like, and he ripped into me. He was like, "Are you even paying attention?" And my mate actually stepped up and he went, "No, he's actually listening to you more than I am. He's trying to understand what you're saying." He's like, and that was probably one of the first, not necessarily because I still didn't understand, probably one of the first moments where I was like, okay, someone else is getting what I do is not normal, but someone else is getting it. Um, and and like you talked about earlier about therapy and things like that, we would talk to each other on that level, that openness, that it was basically therapy for me and for him. Um, so again, it's one of those situations where I've been very, very fortunate that I've been surrounded by people who have been, do you know what, this is you and we accept you. You're quite dry and open about it and we respect that and we're just going to let you do it. And that's been quite an eye opener. But yeah, I do that eye contact thing. I'm terrible for it.
Yeah, I just, it's one of those things where if I'm looking at someone directly for longer than a few seconds, I feel like I'm in the pits of hell, to be honest. Feels like my eyes are on fire if I look at someone for directly for more than a few seconds, because that hence why I'll either like maybe one eye looking at them and sort of looking to the side a little bit, or I'd like look at their nose or their mouth. Like that's a strategy I've sort of followed, because if I look them directly in the eyes, yeah, it's not going to go well for me. And a lot of people have sort of pointed out the fact that sometimes I'm quite monotone or quite blunt, or sometimes things I say may get misinterpreted, so I then have to rephrase something if they don't necessarily understand what I'm saying. It's a couple of those things that I've had before where, people have misinterpreted what I say or it's been blown out of proportion. I'm like, well, sorry, sorry you don't like that, but I'll try my best. At the same time, I'm not gonna, change or mask myself just to fit in with a select group of people. I've learned over especially last couple of years, that I'm gonna be unapologetically myself, and that's something that I think should apply to everyone, neurodivergent or not. You should always be unapologetically yourself within reason.
Yeah.
If you're a massive, like, I'll just swear, dickhead, then
Yeah.
then yeah, you may need to work on that. But ultimately, I think, being yourself is one of the best makeups you can have.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I found with the eye contact thing, it's like wiping clear a whiteboard. As soon as I make eye contact with someone, I'm like completely forget. My brain is too wired about analyzing facial features than it is thinking about what I say. Um, so another a question that I'd love to get from, what I'd love to ask my guests is, if someone's on a journey of self discovery, maybe it's a bit later on and they've just discovered they're neurodivergent. Obviously, we understand, yourself and I, that neurodivergence is from birth. We don't get it later on. So whether they're diagnosed or late diagnosed, they're still on that journey of self-discovery. What sort of little bit of advice, if they were taking their first steps or overcoming one of the biggest barriers that you sort of struggled with personally, what suggestions would you sort of give them to just ease them along the way? And like you said, everyone's different, so it's your opinion. But what would you give like loosely to that person?
First of all, if you're someone that's just been recently diagnosed, you're going to realize that everything you've ever done as a child, you're going to be like, okay, that makes sense now. That makes sense. That's why I'm neurodivergent. That's why I am the way I am. Ultimately, first thing you do is accept yourself, realize that you're not your label. Don't attach yourself to a label. It's a part. Yes, that is a part of you, but it's not the main part of your genetic makeup. It's not a major part of your personality. It just happens to be the thing that okay, this makes so much sense. And even then, you can even talk to other people that have perhaps been through that experience as well of being late diagnosed, then having those people to relate to and then being like, okay, yeah, that makes so much more sense. And, you know, being able to have a network of people to be able to reach out to, whether people are neurodivergent or not, having that network of people to reach out to and actually verbalize and communicate why your diagnosis and why this is all making so much sense. And even then, it can be such a giant minefield. When if you get a late diagnosis, you're thinking of all these things and thinking, what on earth, like, is this going to change my life? Is this going to make an impact? It's not going to make a massive impact on your life, but you'll realize that it makes so much more sense. You get that clarity, you get that feeling of, being able to actually fully release and be yourself without having to mask parts of your personality for people. Because I think, and this is just opinion, that some late diagnosed neurodivergents mask parts of their personalities for such a long time that they don't necessarily know what to do when they actually get that diagnosis. Or if they're around a group of people, they're like, please just be yourself. I don't feel like you have to mask or do anything like that. And I say that to a lot of people, especially my friends, like, please just be unapologetically yourself. I'd rather that than you fake it.
Perfect answer, mate. That is exactly that. I know it's like a cliche phrase, but find your tribe. Like, ironically, neurodivergents, we can be quite solitary creatures, but we still
Yeah.
have a tribe. Like, we still have a handful of people, if not more, of people where we can just kick off our shoes, as to speak, unmask and just be ourselves. If we're not prepared to unmask to the rest of the world, we need at least those people. And obviously, what the message that yourselves and all my guests try and get on this podcast is, there is a world out there where you can be unapologetically you, unapologetically neurodivergent, but you need to start somewhere. So that's perfect advice in my opinion, mate. Um, yeah. Why don't you tell the guys who have sat through this episode and enjoyed it where they can find you, where they can follow your journey, and like social media handles that you wanna share.
Yeah, of
Um,
course, absolutely. So another thing you can do to find out my journey stuff, you can go on to the Amazing Apprenticeships website. If you search up my name, Connell Scholar, you should be able to find that. If you do want to follow me on social media, it's it's awkward when you don't know your own Instagram handle off by heart. But my Instagram handle is cons.one. So I post mainly travel stuff, places that I've been to. I post gym content as well, to not to be egotistical, but just to inspire others that actually they can go and do something if they really, really want to do it. Yeah, and also, yeah, just I'm sure I'll appear somewhere. And you also follow, if you follow Make Fitness Successful, that's the works pages as well. We're doing a lot behind the scenes to really advertise and push that. Yeah, that's a bit of the self glazing done.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Like, to hear your journey and the sort of similarities that we both have, and also that just hearing that you're fighting that good fight from inside the industry and advocating. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I thank you for taking the time out to talk to me.
Thank you. I honestly, it's been an absolute honor to be on the podcast today, and thank you for having me on.